closing arguments, defense. We are just getting into it. We're about halfway through right now, and I can tell you it is a much different tone. Many people, Misty Maris, say a little flippant, but is it working?
A different tone and a different style. So prosecutors yesterday were super clinical when they went through the case. They had slides of the elements. They applied the evidence to the law. I almost felt like I was back in a law school class about how to actually analyze a legal statute. And stood at the podium, didn't move from the podium, very professional. We're seeing a real difference here. Mark Agnifilo walking around the courtroom, really being very, almost casual to a certain degree, and telling a story. So something that stood out to me is that this is much more narrative than pointed with specific references to reasonable doubt or the law or the elements. It's really more about a narrative. And he started off the closing argument talking about how this is government encroachment on someone's personal life. He made what I would think was a good visual, that there's crime scene tape around your bedroom. You go to a hotel with your partner, there's crime scene tape around that hotel room.
Right.
And essentially setting the stage for the defense argument that this was Combs' personal life. It's not part of sex trafficking, it's not part of a broader conspiracy, but it's criminalizing personal conduct and it's government overreach.
Yeah, but what about all of the charges that we just heard about yesterday and about all of the criminal acts that he's accused of that lines up with the evidence and the testimony that we saw?
So right before the lunch break, we started to see a lot more relating to the specific charges. A lot of time spent on certain areas, and this was notable to me. First, a lot of time spent on drug use. And remember yesterday in the prosecution's closing argument, they talked a lot about drug possession and distribution being a predicate crime for RICO. The defense really spent a lot of time saying, this is not in possession with the intent to sell it. And that's what the jury is going to see when they look at that jury form. So they spent a lot of time on that because prosecutors made it sound like it was going to be real easy to convict on RICO if you believe that drug distribution happened. They also spent a great deal of time relating to Cassie Ventura. This was really the focus right before the lunch break, going through a lot of text messages and a lot of the narrative about their relationship, that they were romantic partners in a tumultuous relationship, even showing that 2016 intercontinental video, which has been a big part of the prosecution's case, but the defense used it also.
But he called it a modern day love story. A modern day love story, folks. I mean, that's what he's trying to sell, and then we see the video.
Yeah, a modern day love story to me was a bit much. There were other areas where I thought it was a bit much. And the argument from the defense was that these are romantic partners, they're in a tumultuous relationship, and their relationship looks different than most people's because they have a swinger lifestyle. They do drugs in their own personal lives. So that was where it was. I agree with you. Modern day love story, I think that was a bridge too far and could be very alienating. There were other areas that I think could be very alienating for the jurors. Where I did think a lot of cringe came in my opinion, and I wrote it in my notebook, cringe, was when there was a real focus on Cassie Ventura and her other romantic partners. Agnifilo said she was dating Kid Cudi and Diddy at the same time. She's always ready to go, and kind of like that tone of insinuating that she was promiscuous.
Right.
Also called Michael B. Jordan the most handsome man in the world, and she's spending time with him. And I think when you start to get into those other romantic partners and speaking about her romantic relationships in that way, that can be really, patriarchal, condescending, and victim shaming.
Right.
Because we know, you might not think she was sex trafficked, or there's arguments about that, or part of the RICO conspiracy and all that, sure. But she was a victim of domestic violence, at the very least. I mean, this we know there was violence in the relationship, it's conceded.
And didn't he say something to the effect of, this is not a woman that was clutching her pearls?
Yes. And again, the idea...
Which is not nice.
No. The idea is to focus on consent, and to me, all of that is not going to bode well for the defense. I think... I was in one of the overflow rooms. There's a little more chatter in there. Every single person reacted very negatively to that part of the testimony. And it was so casually said that it really came off very smug, just way too much. Now, a very cringe part of the closing, followed by a very valid point. And the valid point was that yesterday during prosecution's close, they conceded that Cassie Ventura had testified that she engaged in hundreds of freak-offs. And what prosecutors said in their closing was that all you got to believe is that one of these freak-offs was through force, fraud, or coercion, right? That's the critical element. Even if she consented to some, it doesn't mean she consented to all, but force, fraud, or coercion could have been a part of at least one, and that's enough. Now, they used an example of 3 different instances where prosecutors say these are telltale, very clearly sex trafficking. And one was 2016 in Continental.
Right.
Now, what the defense said, because what the jury will see is that there has to be an intent element on the part of Diddy. That he has to act with intent or reckless disregard that he was using force, fraud, or coercion for her to engage. So it's a little bit of a nuanced point, but that intent is really important. And so what Ingle said was, okay, the argument is that she said yes, and sometimes yes was okay. Sometimes she said yes, and it meant no, because she was being forced.
Yeah,
and where do you draw that line?
Right.
And when it comes to intent, you have to look at, would he know that this is force, fraud, or coercion versus saying yes? And again, consent can be revoked at any time, but in the context of what was communicated. And that's why there's such a focus on the text messages.
And here's what happens at the end of trials. You've got the prosecutor's closing argument, you've got the defense closing argument, then the prosecution gets a rebuttal. So they got to tie it back up, they got to bring everybody back over, they've got to try to their side. Can they do it?
I think where the defense is going to go now, so we're at the lunch break, right? So we're going to hear a lot more. They're really going to lean into RICO. We know the next step is they're going to talk about Jane, and I do think the defense needs to go a bit further into the legal requirements of RICO. What we saw today, and this was very theatrical, I would call it, and I don't know if it was very effective. We saw the defense attorney hold up a large blown-up photo of Combs and a lot of his employees. KK was in there, D-Rock was in there, all these names that we've heard throughout. And they all looked happy, it's at a party. And the defense attorney said, what do you see when you look at this photo? Family, love, friendship, whatever it was. And he said, what you don't see is a criminal enterprise. And so I don't think that's enough to really attack the legal elements of the case, where my belief is prosecutors have fallen short, which is the forming of the conspiracy and the continuity to link all of that alleged racketeering activity and agreement to commit crimes to a criminal enterprise. And we have not heard that from the defense yet, where you're getting into those legal issues.
And did you hear that somebody from his security detail is here in court? I heard that somebody.
I did not.
Yeah, not
that's
D-Rock.
big news.
Not D-Rock. Somebody else that is come. So supporters have come here till the end. We are rounding third. We are almost at the finish line. The jurors will get the jury charge at the end of the day, it sounds like, and then we go to deliberations.
Yes, they start deliberations likely Monday at this point, because we're probably not going to have the jury charge until about 4 o'clock. The judge already said they may have to stay late today.
Right.
So the jury will get the case on Monday, and to me, Laura, this is not an easy one. I think the jury is going to have to take some time to work their way through. And I think there's going to be a lot of work going on behind the scenes in that deliberation.
Yeah, a lot of work. They've got a lot of charges to go through. And really quick, before I let you go, I want to show everybody all the way around where we are. This is our media row. And look over here. That's Access Hollywood. This is NBC. News Nation here at the end. But you've been busy. You've been talking to everybody around here. So we're going to go back inside of court here, and we will let you know more how it turns out. Thank you to Misty Maris. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.